The dog had already bitten 2 men that morning before she even walked through the gate. Nobody told her that part. She found out when she noticed the blood on the gravel, 2 dark streaks near the chain-link fence, still wet, and pieced it together from the way the men standing at the perimeter wouldn't look at her directly. That was how they communicated here, not with words, with what they refused to say. Lena Voss had been in this kind of place before. Different bases, different units, different dogs, but always the same smell. Dust and iron and something faintly chemical that clung to the back of your throat. She'd learned not to breathe through her mouth in the first 10 seconds. Old habit. She was 29 years old, 5'4", and carrying a canvas bag that looked like it belonged at a farmer's market. That was the first thing Chief Warren Briggs noticed about her. He said so loud enough for his team to hear. "That your go bag?" he called from across the yard, arms folded, sunglasses on even in the shade. "Or did you bring us lunch?" 3 of the men laughed. A 4th, younger, standing slightly apart, didn't. Lena filed that away. She didn't respond to Briggs right away. She set her bag down near the fence post, crouched, and looked through the chain link at the dog on the other side. He was a Belgian Malinois, nearly 90 pounds, all lean muscle and compressed energy. Black mask, amber eyes. His name was Rook. He was 4 years old, and he had been one of the highest-rated military working dogs in the program, until 6 weeks ago, when the handler who'd worked with him for 3 years was killed in a training accident overseas. Since then, Rook had attacked 2 handlers, refused all commands, and stopped eating for 11 days. The veterinary team had given him a behavioral assessment score so low that the paperwork requesting euthanization had already been drafted. It was sitting on someone's desk right now, waiting for a signature. Lena had read every page of Rook's file on the flight in. She knew the timeline. She knew what they didn't understand about it. Dr. Voss. Briggs was walking toward her now, boots crunching on the gravel. "I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know who made the call to bring in a civilian contractor for this, but my team doesn't need a dog psychologist. What we need is a reliable animal for deployment in 8 weeks. Right now, what we have is a liability. So unless you've got something useful in that farmer's market bag of yours, I'd appreciate if you let us handle this the way we handle things." Lena stood up. She was a full foot shorter than Briggs, and she looked at him the way you look at a problem you've already solved in your head and are just waiting to demonstrate. "What does handle it mean specifically?" she asked. "Means we get a replacement animal. Retire Rook from service. Retire him where?" Briggs's jaw shifted slightly. "That's not your concern. It's on the paperwork," she said. "Page 4. So I've already read it." Silence. The younger man who hadn't laughed was now watching her with something that wasn't quite respect but wasn't dismissal either. His name patch read Hollis. Briggs pulled off his sunglasses. He was maybe 45, built like a man who'd never stopped believing the world owed him deference, and right now his expression was doing something complicated between annoyance and curiosity. "What exactly is your read on the animal?" he asked. "My read," Lena said, "is that Rook is not a dangerous dog. He's a grieving one. There's a difference, and it matters operationally." Someone made a sound. She didn't bother identifying who. "He sent Henderson to the infirmary," Briggs said. Henderson used a prong collar correction on a dog that had just lost his handler. In canine behavioral terms, that's roughly equivalent to walking up to a soldier at a funeral and kicking him. She paused. Rook responded exactly as he was trained to respond when his safety is threatened. His instincts are intact. His drive is intact. His grief is not a malfunction. The yard was quiet except for the distant sound of a helicopter somewhere over the ridge and Rook, moving restlessly behind the fence. Briggs put his sunglasses back on. "You've known this dog for approximately 4 minutes." "I've known this dog for 3 years, Lena said. That landed differently than she'd intended. Or maybe exactly as she'd intended. The distinction felt unimportant in the moment. Briggs stared at her. "Excuse me." I worked with the original program that produced Rook, the breeding program, the early socialization protocol. I was the primary handler for the first 18 months of his life before he was transferred into the operational pipeline. She looked back at the dog through the fence. Rook had stopped pacing. He was looking at her. He doesn't know my voice yet, not after all this time and the stress he's been under. But he knows something. Dogs are like that. The silence that followed was a different quality than the one before. Hollis took a slow step forward. You're saying you raised him. I'm saying I was there when he took his first steps. I'm saying I know which side he prefers to sleep on and what sound he makes when something surprises him, and the exact command sequence his first handler used in check, because that's what Marcus preferred. She stopped. Marcus, his handler, that was his name. In case anyone here was wondering. Briggs's expression had shifted into something she couldn't read behind the sunglasses. The dog's a risk, he said finally, but his voice had lost the flatness of certainty. Then let me go in, Lena said. That's not. You're about to euthanize a 4-year-old working dog with an exceptional operational record because your team doesn't have the behavioral training to distinguish between aggression and trauma response. I'm offering you an alternative. Let me go in. If he bites you, that's my problem. If he bites you on this base, it becomes my problem. Then we have aligned incentives, she said. Let me go in. Briggs looked at his team. One of them, the one named Darrow, she'd learn later, gave a small shrug, the kind that meant, don't ask me. This is your call. Hollis said nothing, but he'd moved close enough to the gate that she understood he intended to have it open fast if something went wrong. Briggs turned back to her. Something in his jaw settled. Your call, he said. It wasn't permission exactly. It was closer to a dare. She recognized the difference and didn't particularly care. She picked up her canvas bag. She unzipped the front pocket and removed a small worn leather pouch, the kind that closes with a drawstring, and tucked it into her vest pocket. Then she asked Hollis to open the gate. He did. She stepped through. He closed it behind her. The yard was about 40 feet across. Rook was at the far end, near the water trough, and the moment the gate clanged shut, he oriented toward her. Weight forward, ears up, every muscle in his body making a decision. She did not look away from him. She also did not look directly at him. This distinction matters enormously with dogs, and almost no one outside the field understands why. It's the difference between a challenge and an acknowledgement. She stood still, bag at her side, not advancing, not retreating. Rook began to move. He wasn't charging, not yet, but the way he moved had an intention behind it. He was covering ground fast, low to the surface, and someone outside the fence said something sharp that she didn't process because her entire attention had narrowed to the animal 20 feet away and closing. 15 feet. She exhaled slowly through her nose. 10 feet. She reached into her vest pocket and removed the leather pouch. She opened the drawstring with one hand, without looking down. Old habit. Rook stopped. Not because of anything dramatic. Not because she raised her hand or made a sound. He stopped because the smell hit him. And what was in that pouch was something specific and layered and old. The kind of scent that doesn't code as memory in the way humans understand memory, but reaches dogs somewhere deeper than cognition. She'd had it for 3 years. She'd been carrying it since the call came in about Marcus. It was a piece of the original training bite sleeve. Small, worn down to almost nothing, but it had come from the facility where Rook was born and trained before anyone else touched him, and it smelled like the first 2 years of his life. Rook stood 8 feet away from her, and his whole body was doing something she recognized, and that was almost too much, if she was being honest, to look at directly. He wasn't the same dog she'd driven to the transfer facility when he was 18 months old. His muzzle had more gray in it than it should for his age. His eyes had the particular quality of an animal who has been in pain long enough that pain has started to feel like a baseline. She crouched down slowly, not going to him, just making herself smaller. "Hey, buddy," she said. In check. It wasn't a command. It wasn't any part of the formal protocol. It was just what she'd said to him every morning for a year and a half when she came into his kennel. Heck, Camo. Just that. Every single morning. Rook made a sound that wasn't a growl. He took one step, then another. When he reached her, he didn't leap or bite or do any of the things his behavioral file said he would do. He pressed the top of his head against her shoulder, hard, the way dogs do when they need something to be real, and stood there, breathing. Outside the fence, no one spoke. She put her hand on the back of his neck. She could feel the tension in him. 4 years of training and 6 weeks of grief and the specific kind of exhaustion that comes from not being understood by anyone around you. She knew something about that, though this wasn't the moment to think about it. "Good boy," she said, still in check. "I've got you." She didn't know how long they stayed like that. Long enough for Rook's breathing to change, long enough for the weight in his posture to shift from braced to settled. Long enough that when she finally looked up, Hollis had both hands on the fence and was staring at her with an expression she'd never seen on a man of his particular training, something unguarded. She stood. Rook stood with her, pressed against her left leg. She looked across the yard at Briggs. He was still wearing the sunglasses. She couldn't read his eyes, but she could read the way he was holding himself, which was completely still in the particular way that men like him go still when they've just revised something they thought they knew. "He's not broken," she said. "He never was." He was waiting. Briggs said nothing. "What your file calls aggression is selective rejection," she continued, walking slowly toward the fence with Rook beside her. He attacked Henderson because Henderson led with dominance on an animal in crisis. He rejected the other handlers because they were strangers following a protocol, and he'd just lost the person he'd spent 3 years trusting with his life. You want to call that a liability? I'd call it proof that his loyalty mechanism is functioning exactly as it was designed to. She reached the fence. That's not a broken dog. That's an exceptional one. She unlatched the gate herself. Rook walked through with her. A few of the men stepped back. Rook noticed and dismissed them in the same motion, a flick of attention, then back to watching Lena. Briggs finally took off his sunglasses. He was quiet for a long time. The kind of quiet that has a shape to it, that means something is being recalibrated internally in a way that doesn't come easily to a man like him. "What does he need?" he said finally. "Time," Lena said. "Consistency. A handler who understands that trust in a working dog isn't a setting you switch on. It's built, day by day. The same way it was built the first time. We have 8 weeks. That's enough if we start correctly." Briggs looked at Rook. Rook looked at Briggs without aggression, but without deference either, just the frank appraisal of an animal deciding where someone fell in his understanding of the world. "Will he work with my team?" Briggs asked. "He'll work with whoever earns it," Lena said. Hollis made a short sound, nearly a laugh, not quite. He caught himself and pressed his lips together, but the shape of it was still visible on his face. Briggs looked at Lena for a moment that went on slightly longer than she'd expected. "I need to know how," he said. "Not the basics, the actual how. Everything you know about this specific dog." "I know," she said. "That's why I flew 14 hours to get here." She reached into her canvas bag and pulled out a thick folder. Not a digital file, not a tablet, and a paper folder, held together with a rubber band, annotated in 3 different pen colors. "Everything Marcus's team sent me after his passing," she said. "His observations, his notes. 3 years of working with Rook in the field. I've been compiling it since I got the call." She handed the folder to Briggs. Marcus wanted Rook to have a good life after him. He just didn't have time to arrange it. Briggs took the folder. He looked at it for a moment, the way you look at something when you suddenly understand it's heavier than it appears. "I'll need a few days to go through this with your team," Lena said. "I'll need full access to Rook's daily schedule, and I need the euthanization paperwork pulled from wherever it's sitting, because we're not going back to that conversation." Briggs glanced up at her. That last part's not a request, she added, in case it wasn't clear. Something moved through his expression that might have been the leading edge of respect if you caught it at exactly the right angle. "Hollis," he said. "Sir! Get Dr." Voss set up with access and a workspace. "Yes, sir." Briggs looked at Rook one more time. Rook sat down next to Lena's left foot, not commanded, not prompted, and looked out at the yard with the focused calm of an animal who had made a decision and intended to stick with it. "He'll be mission ready?" Briggs asked. "He was always mission ready," Lena said. "Your team just didn't know how to listen to him." She picked up her canvas bag. Rook stood with her automatically, weight shifting to follow her, 70-some-odd pounds of trained military animal falling into step beside a woman who looked, to anyone watching for the first time, like she had no business being here. To anyone watching for the second time, she looked like the only person in this yard who'd known exactly what she was doing from the moment she walked through the gate. Hollis held the door open for her as she walked toward the building. She nodded once. He nodded back. Behind them, Briggs stood in the yard with the folder in his hands, looking down at Marcus's handwriting on the first page, reading the opening line of a dead man's notes on the dog that was now finally going to be okay.